Hi and welcome to this week's Mailbox, where we go through some comments that you guys have been putting on YouTube and discuss them in a little bit more detail. This week there's actually quite a diverse mix of comments. So the first thing is where's the mailbox? For those who are new to this, basically there's a screenshot in the background. I ask you where the mailbox is, the specific location as well as the zone. Someone last week only put the zone, so you don't get your name up here. So last week, a few more people did get this. The week before, which was even easier, like no one got. And then this one, loads of people got it. It was indeed Feathermoon Stronghold in Feralus. There's a couple of interesting comments here before we sort of go past this. I'll point to a couple at the bottom there. The night, talking about the fact that the Night Elves could just retake this area and what was happening here during the War of Thorns. I think this might be more of a technical issue than a story-wise issue. It's true that, as this shows, the Horde don't have the whole of Kalimdor because the Night Elves are ensconced here in Feralus. I don't know that we'd say there's a lot of them. I think it's supposed to be just sort of a settlement. It's very difficult to tell in World of Warcraft, isn't it? The difference between a city and a village, because the cities can't actually be as big as cities, and the villages sometimes are even smaller than actual villages. They're really more like hamlets. So it's tricky to say how populated something is supposed to be. But yeah, I think this was just an issue that the War of Thorns was just supposed to be, in a couple of zones. Where the bulk of the Night Elves are, it's probably supposed to be assumed that the Night Elves have effectively been driven from Kalimdor. But I don't know. Feralus is one of those zones that's just nothing really happens in it since vanilla. It was there in vanilla, and it was a fairly important zone in vanilla, but it's almost like fallen off the map, hasn't it? Then there was another comment about their bloody Zappy Boy again. Zappy Boy isn't dead. We see him in the last shot of the cinematic behind Sourfang. That was before I got to him. He's dead. I told you he's dead. He's absolutely dead. Anyone that's not on that Horde blimp and didn't go out of the portal. So you've got two types of Horde that were alive at the Lordaeron and still alive now. There's the ones who were evacuated through the portal, not him. There's the ones who are on the blimp, and he's not down below. I killed him. I told you I killed him. Anduin actually killed him, and then I killed him again and again. Even as Horde Thete, I still killed him. He's dead. Just get used to it. Make peace with it. Seriously. Right, this week's mailbox. Easy. Should be easy. So you've got to say where it is, which specific location it's in, and which zone it's in. Simple as that. Right, on to the first one then. So again, it wouldn't be a mailbox recently if there wasn't something about Sylvanas here, so we'll just get this out of the way. It says, killing off Sylvanas would be a massive no-no. Indeed, I agree. It says, however, I definitely agree that she will step down one way or the other. I don't think her sacrifice will mean her final death. Rather, she will become something more or something different than we've seen. Perhaps she becomes the Lich Queen after Bolvar's death, if that were to happen, just something. I mean, that's actually quite interesting. As I keep suggesting, I think she'll voluntarily step down. That may take the form of some sort of sacrifice, but I don't think she would be killed off in the sense that we think of things being killed off. But it would be quite interesting if she were to become effectively the Lich Queen, because it's certainly open for that. We've got Bolvar's daughter in the game now, so you would, especially with Bolvar doing funny things in Legion. I mean, I just thought that might be some clumsy, because at the start of Legion, when they had to do these artifact campaigns, and some of them were basically the same as each other, they didn't actually come up with 36 completely different ones, but they had to come up with quite a lot. And I can imagine the artifact weapon being a good idea at some point. Someone suggested, oh, let's do this thing, and everyone, yeah, that's a great idea. And then when they got down to it, thinking, oh my god, we've got to do all these artifact storylines, there was probably a certain amount of gloom setting over, so they, folded some into the same one as much as possible. But it still meant an awful lot of things. I imagined at the time, this isn't an accusation, but I sort of imagined maybe the writing got a bit lazy here and there, and maybe the Bolvar thing would just be as it was and then never picked up again. But that's maybe not true either. Maybe there was a plan for it. And as I say, Bolvar's daughter coming into it, which suggests that at some point he is going to have a larger role, potentially in BFA itself. Maybe it might not be. This might be a slow burner that's going to go on to the next expansion. That's what I think is most likely as well, because I think there's enough for them to do. There's enough meat to BFA story-wise that they don't really need that to happen this expansion. I think that might be more next expansion, but it may not be, because I do think the Sylvanas thing will be concluded this expansion. So it may be that that does rear its head at some point, and that, yes, there is some situation where Bolvar, for whatever reason, again, stops being the Lich King. Obviously, he can't just go back to being Bolvar, the Bolvar. And then maybe Sylvanas takes up the crown because she realises she's been played by the old god. She steps aside, needs another role for herself, realises that she's no longer an effective leader of either the Horde or even the Forsaken, and so she agrees to become the Lich Queen. That, you know, I'd be okay with that. I think that would be all right. I think that would be an interesting idea. So yeah, good idea. I think that one's definitely got some merit in it. On to the other one. So about, you know, what, because I was talking about, I think this thing is gearing up for fairly soon, potentially Azeroth waking up as a Titan. And before Argus, because I'll read the comment out actually, because I totally agree with this. It says, Argus still existed despite Argus the Unmaker being an entity. The only reason why Argus looks the way it does because of the Legion's own doing, I'd assume. Yeah, I don't think that's an assumption. I think that's quite correct. I'm guessing that Sargeras forced Argus out of his shell, which led to the cataclysmic damage of Argus itself. There's actually one little thing there which I think is a little wrong. I'll go with that in a minute. I'm guessing that when Azeroth is ready, the Pantheon will return to help her without destroying Azeroth, the planet, and the majority of the life on it. Now, here's the thing. The assumption, or my assumption anyway, not by everyone else, was always that the world is there as like a shell to protect the world soul. When the world soul hatched effectively, then the world was basically done for. This isn't necessarily true, and there was nothing in the past lore that suggested that this was the case, as far as I know. However, it was interesting with Argus that, first of all, yeah, okay, if you looked at Argus, it did look like it had been split open like an egg. But I don't think that was a birthing of Argus. It was actually shoving it in there. You've got to remember, Argus as a world wasn't a world soul. Argus, the world soul, was effectively shoved. It was artificial insemination. He was shoved in there. So potentially the fissures, the giant fissure in Argus was part of that process. Or it may just have been a simple ruination of the world because of the Legion. Who knows? But yeah, it wasn't a natural world soul. Otherwise, Sargeras would have destroyed it. Even if he had a use for the Draenei, well, not Draenei at the time, Eredar, Minari, whatever. He could have transplanted those to another world and then killed the world soul. And then, So it wasn't a world soul. So yeah, they put it in there. But yeah, certainly the fact that it didn't get any worse when Argus the Unmaker became a physical thing, albeit small enough for us to smash with our weapons, is strongly suggestive, if not absolute proof, that a world soul can emerge from the world itself without knackering it. So it does open up the possibility that the Titan doesn't even have to come through a physical fissure. It might just materialise out in space somehow. A wizard did it. So yeah, it is possible that Azeroth can emerge as a Titan without any harm to Azeroth the planet, which opens itself up, as I say, for what I think is going to be the totally new direction in the World of Warcraft story very, very soon, in the next couple of years. But when it says about Azeroth and ready, the Pantheon will return, no, I don't think it will. I don't think it will. It's not impossible, but I just don't think it will. I don't think it needs to. I think the idea with the Pantheon, I think they're supposed to be all locked in that prison with Sargeras. I think they're part of it, I don't think they can just nip out for a takeaway or to go and, attend a baby shower for Azeroth or anything. I think they're stuck there now. I think that's the whole idea. But, again, anything can happen there. But yeah, it's certainly true, as I say, that there's no reason why we have to believe that Azeroth the world would be even damaged at the loss of Azeroth the World Soul. We don't even know that Azeroth the World Soul is a physical thing within it. It's not even like it's going to leave a hollow core or anything. It could be solid all the way through as a world, and Azeroth the entity is just that, like a nebulous spirit. that doesn't actually occupy a physical space as such, but needs the world to sustain it while it's in there, which is why destroying the world destroys the world's soul. Any number of things that can happen there, yeah. On to the next one. I have to disagree with this one. It says, actually, Bane has made his feelings about Sylvanas' action known, and there was a lot of dissidence within the Horde. It's not just Saurfang that is upset, especially with Sylvanas using Blight to kill Alliance and Horde during the Lordaeron scenario. No, you're just making things up, I'm afraid, there. So, first of all, first point first. Actually, Bane has made his feelings about Sylvanas' actions known. No, he hasn't. No, he didn't. When she was doing what she was doing in the Lordaeron scenario, he just went away with it. Completely went. He didn't. No, even grumbling. No muttering. No nothing. In the final cinematic, he did sort of square up to Sylvanas, but that wasn't about Sylvanas' actions. That was about Saurfang's actions. He was not happy that they were leaving Saurfang alone. That was it. He was taking no exception whatsoever. He'd have been, as far as we could tell from that comment, happy as Larry if she'd have gone, right, open the doors, grabbed him by the neck and dragged him, kicking and screaming through and up to the blimp. He was just upset that he was being left alone. Even then, however, and that had nothing to do with the use of the Blight, nothing to do with what she did at Lordaeron, nothing to do with the burning of Teldrassil. He showed no dissent whatsoever there. I'm quite sure he was upset by it, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting for one moment that he's going along with it, absolutely not. But he is not making his feelings known. Even then, however, when he said, we can't just leave him alone, she basically said, what are you going to do about it then? And he went, for the Horde, I'll do as I'm told. Moped off. Shoulders slumped, head down. That's not dissent. That's just a little bit of... and then getting bit slapped back down again, where he belongs. So no. And also this thing about... It's not just Saurfang that's upset, especially... there's a lot of distance within Horde. Where? Where is it? Where is it being made known? It isn't. Again, I have no doubt that there's an awful lot of the Horde are not too happy about it. But not anyone, only Saurfang has shown any open dissent to Sylvanas. No one else has. It's just imagining all that's happening here, and this is what I'm trying to talk about with the poor quality writing at this point in certain areas, not all the whole thing. People are going, hang on a minute, there's lots of members of the Horde that wouldn't be happy with this, so they're just imagining that they're not happy with it. But there's no evidence of it in the story. There is nowhere in the story where it shows this unhappiness, apart from on Saurfang's part. That's it. He's the only one to have shown any unhappiness at all. Even Bane did not show any unhappiness. He only showed unhappiness with leaving Saurfang on his own. That was it. And then when she invited to go out with him, did he do that? No, he did. No, he did not. That's what he did. That's what he did. Anyway. Right, on to gameplay things. So it says here, I'd like if they kept the system, talking about Azeroth, artifact weapons from Legion. Only now that we've scrapped the artifact weapons against the Sword of Sargeras with new weapons, developing it with Azeroth. No, I'd have still kept the weapons. Because we didn't scrap the weapons. We just drained them of their power. Now, you could have argued, now this might have been something to go for, you could have argued that we drained our weapons of their power with the Sword of Sargeras, but then we still kept the shells of the weapons and then used the Azeroth to reinfuse them, giving them whole new abilities, and that could be a device to excuse wiping the Legion abilities on those artifacts and regaining new abilities over the next expansion. Now, I'm not saying they wouldn't have come in for a certain amount of criticism over that, because it's basically wiping a load of abilities only to give us what may have been, in some cases, similar abilities back. But I think that would have been better in the situation now. Now, here's an interesting point. This isn't like a comment from video, but this is something Hekelio was tweeting about. So as recommend, I'll give the overall view as well. This is quite interesting. So recommendation, put a level cap on each slot instead of a minimum level. So if your 325 shoulders have Thunderous Blast and a level of 19, make that trait's upward scaling stop at level 19, but usable at low levels. The argument here is, what he's arguing here is, let's say you get a piece of Azeroth armor, and you get it from a quest. So, and your neck's enough to unlock all the traits on it. But then you get an Azeroth piece higher item level from a dungeon. And because it's higher item level, you don't have the neck thing to unlock all those traits. But let's say the traits on it are exactly the same as the ones on the quest. Because it's not like you've got quest traits, then dungeon traits, then raid traits. There are, there's the odd trait that's maybe you don't get on the earlier ones. But basically the traits are the traits. So what he's arguing is, why should I have a piece of armor with these traits? I've already unlocked these traits. I've got access to these traits. Then I get a higher item level armor piece. And all of a sudden I can't unlock those exact same traits. How does that make sense? So what he's suggesting is that they scale up to the new cap. So, you put on your higher level piece of armor. You've still unlocked all those traits, but they're going to get stronger as you level your neck up to a cap. So if Thunderous Blast, for example, and let's say on the lower level one, you needed item level, 17 to unlock it. And let's say you've got neck level 18, not item level, neck level 18. So you've got your Thunderous Blast and it's capped because it was 17 on the weaker armor. You've now got the stronger armor where the cap is 19. So at neck level 18, the Thunderous Blast is better than it was on your last one because you're at neck level 18 and it keeps going up till 19. Yeah, and then you get your neck level 19 and it gets better still. Then you get neck level 20, but it doesn't get better still because the cap was 19. So that's what he's talking about there. I think that would be a lot better idea with the Azeroth traits as well. I think that's something that's well worthy of discussion. So if you're interested in that yourself, I may do a video on it at some point, but it's not my idea, so I feel a bit cheeky. But follow Hikili on Twitter. You could always get involved in that discussion as well, and maybe let Blizzard know that you think that would be a potentially good idea as well in terms of dealing with that. Because I know because to be fair to Blizzard, they do take ideas on board. They do have their fixated. They can be quite annoying because when they fixate on a thing, they really want to do it. But there's often some wriggle room on the periphery of it so that they still basically get what they want. But you're just saying, well, yeah, but if you did it this way, then it would be a good compromise. They do tend to be fairly amenable to that. Look at, for example, the fact that recently they have made changes to the auction house system to stop those bastards posting like 400 stacks of one monolite ore. So thumbs up there. And many people could argue, well, they should have done that before the expansion came out. But then I would argue it's not like there was hundreds of forum posts for people calling for that. So I think fair enough on that one. They've also reverted the change where you can't trade Azeroth armor. So they are willing to be flexible around certain things. So, it's worth getting involved in that discussion. Right, on to the next one. So, reason for having red-blue consonants is so that they have to cross the ocean to fight, thus navies are important. When we first found out that Kulturas, we were going back to Kulturas, which was long before they announced Battle for Azeroth and even before we knew anything about it, because of the data mined armor sets. My fear was, oh shit, naval battles. Because that, Kulturas you associate with Warcraft 2. What do I associate with Warcraft 2? The naval stuff, which I hated. I still prefer, when Warcraft 2 came out, I still preferred to play Warcraft 1 in terms of player versus player. The storyline, the campaign was much better on Warcraft 2 than Warcraft 1 because there was some proper story there. But yeah, and until Warcraft 3 came out, my main RTS was still Warcraft 1, even when Warcraft 2 came out. Did not enjoy that. However, yeah, so I had a real fear about that. And I was quite pleased that that didn't emerge. But yeah, you talk about this, the reason for that is so that... The thing is, though, they haven't put it in. That's not to say they couldn't put it in at some time in the future, and it's not to say that it's not in their plans. But the fact that they... Something like that would occur to me to be something you'd release with the start of an expansion, as a feature of an expansion, as opposed to just a patch. In whatever form it happens to take. So I have some hopes that that's not the reason, that they have another purpose for it. But I have to confess that, when we first found out Kulturas was going to be a thing, I thought, oh no. And then, yes, when we found out that this was going to be a thing, I did think, oh no. again. But the fact that it hasn't emerged gives me some hope that it won't. Because I shudder to think what it's going to take the form of. But, you know, but we will see. Time will tell. Time will tell. Hello, next one. So next one, it says, ever realise you look exactly like John Goodman? Well, no, but an awful lot of people have said that. But the thing is, the odd thing is, I replied to this person that says, well, that's quite interesting you say that. Because I have a few people done. But last year it was all about Russell Crowe. Everyone kept saying, oh, you look like Russell Crowe. So it was like 2017, I was Russell Crowe. 2018, John Goodman. I said, I can't wait to see what I'm going to be in 2019. But then, you know, just this weekend, someone said, oh, I didn't know Russell Crowe played a Rhett Pally. So I'm back to Russell Crowe. So if I had the technical skill, I have no technical skill with digital media. I try and use a bit, but I'm very amateurish. And if I could, though, I would try and do a merge of Russell Crowe and John Goodman to see what that unholy combination looks like. Does it look like me? Maybe someone else could do that with a bit of skill, do a face morph thing with John Goodman and Russell Crowe with roughly the same expression. Does it look like me? Because, yeah, I don't know. Right, next one. It says, so you suggested not... Well, first, this was that video that's gone mad. 100,000... I've now got a Warcraft video at 100,000 views, so I suppose that's good. And also, it's the fastest growing video I've ever had. Absolutely insane. It's now calmed down, because that's what happens with these videos. They go loopy for a week, and then they do nothing. Because remember, for a week on YouTube, it artificially bungs it up, the thing. So a lot of people get it. Couldn't believe that, though. But anyway, it's paid for... I've sent some Warhammer stuff. I sent off for a very nice... It won't arrive for weeks. So thank you very much for people who've watched that. You've paid for something that hopefully will solve my Warhammer transport problem. But more on that in a few weeks' time. But anyway, so it says in the video here, you suggested nothing. Well, I don't actually promise to suggest anything. I don't know what that comment's about. But anyway, the main comment here is, it says, they want to make war and increase conflict between Horde and Alliance, not allow cross-faction guilds. Then why do you have factions at all? I did try and reply to this person to explain it. But just to explain to anyone else who thinks it might be strange that in the game when they're really trying to do this faction v faction thing, which is not the first time they've tried to do it, by the way. But, you know, to be fair, if we're going to be fair, maybe they'll make it stick this time. I still suspect not, but who knows? And then it's talking about, oh, so why would they then do, you know, faction across, guilds across factions? Because that would make no sense. It makes perfect sense. So here's the thing about factions in an MMO. The reason you have factions is for PvP purposes. That's the reason you have factions. But for PvE purposes, factions make no sense and have never made sense in MMO for two reasons. One, we always have a common threat anyway, because that's how you provide the narrative for dungeons and raids. We fight against a common threat because those are the villains in the dungeons and raids, and that's what forms the main narrative for the overall expansion. Which is why when people kept talking about Battle for Azeroth as a PvP expansion, under no circumstances is it a PvP expansion. You know, it's an Old Gods expansion. Pure and simple, Old Gods expansion. And it's even that's not even something building up. Right now, all the cinematics are... All the big cinematics which tell the main narrative got nothing to do with Horde versus Alliance. The whole expansion is not Horde versus Alliance. They've just spiced it up a little bit with that, that's all. So that's the first reason, the fact that we always have this common enemy anyway. The second reason is that an MMO ultimately lives or dies as being a sociable game. That's the whole point, massively multiplayer. So you have lots of players. And what you do by having factions in PvE is you prevent people being able to play with their friends on the character they would like to play. People have to make a decision, unless you all happen to want to play the same faction. But the larger the group of friends you find, whether you're meeting them online or real life friends, the less likely that is to be the case. So that means someone has to sacrifice something. Do they sacrifice the playing with their friends, or do they sacrifice playing the character they want to play? That was literally the true in vanilla in terms of class, but it's still true now in terms of the race and the storylines you can access. you can only access some of the storylines on your choice. You can't access all of them without playing another character on that different faction. So that's why it's a barrier to the social experience, and it goes at odds with the main narrative in the game anyway. There are any number of characters who cross that faction divide. NPCs do it all the time. It's just player characters apparently can't, and yet we're supposed to be super powerful. Why shouldn't we be able to cross that faction divide? If we want to, and you don't have to. So that's the reason there. It exists for PvP. And in games that don't have any restrictions, MMOs that don't have restrictions on you being able to play with your friends, even they only have factions. They still have factions, but they just have them for PvP. Because that's the only purpose for it. Anyway, next one, on to faction, says, when are you coming back to the Alliance? I know it hurts you to do quests for those atrocious trolls, and here there's no danger of being blighted to death by your own leader. I've got Bubble, remember. Borrowless will fit a British man like yourself quite nicely. Well, I did do it, of course, during beta. I have experienced that quest. The answer to that one simply is, at some point, it'll have settled down in here, and I will level up my Paladin, my Alliance Paladin on the North American account, which I have anyway, just so that I can now and then post on the North American forums. It's an expensive way of being able to access those forums. It's a bit cheeky, I always say. But yeah, that is the answer to that one there. So yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be a few months, but at some point I will have hopefully got myself settled into a nice cycle of just being able to do a few Mythic Plus dungeons and maybe a heroic raid. And then spend other time on... Well, I have got alts as well that I want to do for profession purposes, but also, yeah, the Alliance character on the North American account is probably the answer to that one. Next one, where are we? Oh yeah, this one was a strange comment. So this is regarding BFA. It says, awful expansion, people bought it in good faith and it's expletive deleted. This is a bit of a strange thing to say. Whether an expansion is good or bad tends to depend on the content patches later on, not the start of the expansion, because the start of the expansion is never a deception. You always know exactly what you're getting with it, because it's what people test in the beta. And even if you're not in the beta, you can easily find out what it's actually like before you buy it. Now, if you're someone who bought it... Well, first of all, if you're someone who bought it back in January, I think you'd be able to get your money back as long as you... before it was launched anyway. But I don't know about the rules. There might be different laws in different countries. But either way, unless you're absolutely certain that you're going to want to play it, you should never advance order any game, really. I know they sometimes tempt, and the big tempter for BFA was being able to access the allied races sooner rather than later. But given that at the time there wasn't any other new content in the game, I think it would have been a bit foolish to do that unless you were absolutely nailed on for playing BFA. I was, and so I advanced ordered the game. So, yeah, I don't really think that anyone has any argument here, because there is nothing about the BFA at the moment or for the next couple of months that is going to be a surprise to anyone other than the content of the cinematics. And I don't think anyone's complained about the quality of the cinematics. Everything else was known about. We knew what content was going to be in. We knew what the new talents were going to look like. We knew what the classes were going to play like. We knew about Azeroth and the Azeroth gear, all these different systems that have come in. We knew about all of that before it launched. So, yeah, I think that's unfair. And also, I don't think you can ever consider an expansion. I mean, if you consider an expansion bad at the start of the expansion, then what you're really saying is you think the game is bad and you shouldn't be playing it. Whereas it's later on, isn't it? Because Warlords of Draenor, was, whether you thought it was good or bad at the start of the thing, it didn't become a problem. There was no real criticism of it, apart from the forced garrisons thing, which was a criticism long before it came out, by the way. The bad things about it didn't emerge until later, because the bad things about it were we didn't get anything after the initial launch of it. Next one. So, again with the mob scaling, it says, I do see a potential problem with mob scaling, but it's a rather specialised problem. Namely, those who want to do the Iron Man challenge. Prior to the scaling, you could easily grind green level mobs, which are fairly weak, but still grant XP. But with the scaling, that loophole has been closed. Well, it is, and you're quite right. It's quite a specialised little problem. What I would say here is, well, there's two things. First of all, the Iron Man challenge is a community supported thing. So it's not really a Blizzard thing. So they don't have to worry about that. But the second thing is this. You could actually take the opportunity to say that the Iron Man challenge is no longer doable in the game as such, because that was the old thing. So now what you say, as you quite rightly note, because you can't take the much slower but safer route of dealing with those green mobs, you can now call it Iron Man Extreme or Iron Man 2000 or something suitably impressive, which would, because you don't get an in-game thing for it anyway, which would set out the difference between someone completing it now, where yes, it's more difficult, and someone who completes at the time. For those who don't know, by the way, the Iron Man challenge is the idea that you start off a character at level 1 and you level it all the way to cap. Now, I've not done, let me get this right. I think you're not allowed to use like dungeon gear, you're not allowed to use heirlooms. You're not allowed to, I don't think you're even allowed to use greens. Are you even allowed to use greens? I think you just have to do it with like white and grey gear. I think that's right. And you're not allowed to die. If you die, it's ended, it's finished. Got to do it without dying at all. Is the key thing there. So it probably pays to be a paladin, I suppose. Would have been a lot easier in Legion, actually, especially, wouldn't it? Because you could have, at a certain level, after a certain level, taken Divine Intervention just to cover for any little, problems there. So, yeah, but yeah, that's what I would do. I know it's a community-led thing and there's no necessarily overview of it, but I would just call it Iron Man Extreme. See who's the first person to complete the Iron Man Extreme. Okay, on to the final one. This is again to do with the old factions thing. If you were to just basically dissolve factions as a thing for PvE purposes. Because I'm pretty sure they will not merge the servers because of character names. In such a merge, they would have to tell people to delete their own characters, only the known ones, so that they can play their own characters. They would not get away with that. Blah, blah, blah. That's not true at all. You've got to bear in mind, so you're thinking in terms of the current World of Warcraft system. They wouldn't use the current World of Warcraft naming system. That's the whole point. You've got to look at games that have these mega servers. There's Elder Scrolls Online, which has a lot of players playing it, and you've got a North American server and you've got a European server. When I'm going through, do I constantly go, oh no, name taken, name taken, name taken? No, because that's not how it works. There's all sorts of things you can do with it. You could have family names which provide the unique elements to it. You could have, your identity based on your username. So that your character name can be whatever. You can have your character called Fred Smith, and you can have a million Fred Smiths, and no one will really care because your actual identity is not your character name. That's just a moniker. A bit like the titles. Like you could have a million people in World of Warcraft with the Firelord title. Makes no difference because there's something else that is its unique identity. So that's what I would say on that one. You wouldn't use the current World of Warcraft naming system. You'd still be able to call all those characters the same names, and it would all be absolutely fine. So yeah, so that's not an issue at all. It's not just not a blocker. It's not even an issue. It's an easy thing to deal with because you just change the naming system while still keeping your characters at the name they want. You might even find the name you've called a character something because you moved to a realm where someone else already had that character. You might find that you can actually give it the name you originally wanted. It doesn't matter that there's two of you even in the same guild with us, because you can have two people with the same name in the same guild anyway now because of connected realms. The thing that identifies them now, that unique thing, is that realm thing. So you just have some, and there's only a limited number of realms, which is why there's only a limited number of Fred Smiths you can have, and you can't even have the space between it. Whereas if you create something else that's the identifier, instead of realm, something you come up with yourself, like family name, that can create far more of them. So it actually creates opportunities for more people to have a name that they really want. Oh, that's basically it. We're done. So, thanks very much for the comments. Keep them coming. I'll do these each week. Remember, if you know where that mailbox is, and you really should know where that mailbox is, then just say where it is, which zone it's in. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share for further content. And until next time, I will see you later.